ABC Sports presents a Frick Media Productions, created by the founder and editor at the ABC Network, Sam Frick. And now, stand up and make some noise. The Courtside Ballers podcast starts now. Joining me is the head boys basketball coach of the Westview Warriors, Chandler Pribble, as his team makes it back to semi-state for the first time since 2018. Coach, it's been a minute since that regional championship against Erie 21st Century. What's kind of been the initial thoughts coming out of regionals and getting ready for semi-state at Muncie Central?
Yeah, I mean, just a lot of excitement for our team, for our fans, and the community. It feels like it's been a long time coming. I mean, we've been in that situation. This was the fourth time, and this was maybe the best team that we've played in those 4 years. So it was pretty special to be able to finally get it done against a team that was that talented.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that game in a matter of moments. But you look at this team, Coach, 25-1. This is the best team that we've seen since that 2018 team that made it to semi-state. You've had plenty of great teams in your time at Westview and even before you came to Westview. So this is a standard we've come to expect with this program. But going into the season, what's kind of been the initial feels coming out of a regional berth last year again for Westview? You had an experienced team coming back. You had a freshman in Bryce Yoder. Just kind of talk about, was this something you feel like this could happen?
We didn't really know where the ceiling was at. We knew where our baseline was at, which was going to be good at the very least. But there's some pieces that we didn't know. Like, I didn't realize our ball pressure and our defense could be as good as what it was. I wasn't sure how we would handle guarding against size, or we've got some different mismatches that aren't necessarily in our favor at times. So we weren't really sure where those things were at. Offensively, we felt like we could be pretty good and be pretty hard to guard because we could have five guys that could make a shot and could score kind of at any time. And thankfully, our offense has been really good this year, and our defense has been actually something we've been able to rely on. It's not been something that some of the flaws I thought maybe we would haven't necessarily been there or been exploited like I thought.
Yeah, and you mentioned the offense and then your defense a little bit too, but obviously with the offense at Westview, you got the 1-2 punch of Caden Grau, the Hope College commit, and Austin Schleybaugh, just a junior, 2 1,000-point scorers at Westview, which is it's not as common as people think it is these days and whatnot. But talk about the combination with those two, and then talk about some of the other pieces of competence, such as a Pierce Yoder, who has been probably their most consistent shooter on the team.
Yeah, I mean, with Austin and Caden, it makes my job so much easier. There's times where in my past years of coaching where we would have to really, do a lot of work on our end as coaches to try to get guys in the right spots. But they're able to just create so much for themselves and for other people that it makes it a whole lot easier for us. When teams try to change a defense, they are usually aggressive enough to attack it before they maybe even get set up in it. To where they get an easy shot or it creates, an open three for a guy like Pierce. So yeah, those two, they do so much for us that, when Caden is gone next year, it's going to be noticeable because he makes it look so easy at times. But then, Bryce is shooting like 48% from three. Pierce is, I think, almost to 40%. And for those two, their percentages should be, I think, a lot higher. But it took them a while early in the year to kind of get used to the pace of the game. And whenever we play against, Northridge in the beginning of the year or like a Gary now, that speed is just so much different than the JV level or for Bryce the 8th grade level. But yeah, they've really come a long way. And it makes it so much harder to guard Austin and Caden because you can't step over and help off of a Bryce or Pierce or Daniel Yoder shooting it well or Kane Reinhold. Those guys, they're just all able to make open shots.
Yeah, and we talked a lot about the star players at Westview, but you don't get to this point without the role players with Westview. I know you've got quite a few role players. Who's been that one guy this year, and even in the past, that's kind of been the spark that maybe nobody gives enough credits?
Oh man, we have a few different ones really. I think it just depends on the time of the game and the type of game. But so early in the year against Northwood, Bryce Yoder ends up getting a couple different steals, full court pressing, just kind of on his own. Decided I'm going to pick up the ball and do what he does well, which is pressure the basketball. Got a steal, got an and one. The crowd goes crazy. Like that's a huge spark, and he's able to bring that into most games that he plays, just because he is such a good on-ball defender. But then the shot making ability of Pierce Yoder, it gets everybody going. The crowd, like I remember it just on Saturday, he hits a big three and the place just erupts. That's something that you can see the joy on Austin and Caden's faces when Pierce gets to do what he's good at and hit open shots. It just gets everybody fired up. And then, you've got Kane Reinhold. The dude just gets offensive rebounds like crazy, or at least gets a tip out, but he's always flying around doing something, or maybe it's just a great block out that lets somebody else get a rebound. But, those guys do such a good job of just filling their role. And it seems like, there's times where Kane blocks out really well and he doesn't get the rebound, but that is huge for us because then Austin gets an easy one, or somebody else is able to kind of get a rebound that bounced on the ground because he blocked out a big guy. Those are the small things that you don't maybe notice in a stat sheet and doesn't get written about in the newspaper, but that's what helps a team be great.
The shocking thing is we haven't even mentioned Daniel Yoder yet, and he's been one of your top rebounders at Westview too. So he's also a guy that maybe gets overlooked a little bit at Westview as well. I want to talk about the Gary 21st Century game. That's a big game. They were preseason favorites coming in this year in Class 2. We know what Gary 21st Century is. They have a lot of athletes. They got size over there, and they're one of those teams when they go up to a big lead, they typically put teams away pretty quickly. And you were down 10 points in the first quarter at North Judson against Gary 21st Century. I believe you've only trailed by that much all year, I think once against Northridge. And that was the only team you lost was against Northridge, who, by the way, they're going to semi-state. So that's a pretty good loss for your team. Talk about the timeout. How you were able to recover from a start like this. And then talk about Schleybal's 33-point performance. Because obviously, while others contributed as well to make this happen, his performance was quite special for him.
Yeah, early in the game, we felt like we just needed to settle in offensively. The other thing was we felt like we had gotten a few stops against Gary in the early parts of the game, but we just missed a block out, and you can't do that when you're playing against great teams. So once we kind of settled in there, I think that helped. And then after that timeout, we ended up making a few shots, and once, especially when it's Austin and Caden are making a few shots, it just settles everybody else down. Like, okay, we really can do this, and there's not really that doubt. I don't think they had that doubt going into the game, but once it starts and you see Gary goes on a run and we were struggling a little bit, it might be there a little bit until those guys settle you down. But yeah, Austin and his 33 points. He can score in a lot of different ways, and he's so darn athletic. So they're big guys. They are big, but they didn't necessarily elevate well. So he's able to just attack downhill and attack their chest. And as soon as he would do that, they would swing down and foul him. So he's getting to the free throw line quite a bit, or he's able to take that contact and still finish around their bodies. And, he ended up going 2 for 3 from the 3-point line. And I feel like that's the thing where everybody always questions, well, he's not a very good shooter. Well, that's not actually accurate. He's shooting 41% from three. He's a good shooter. He just doesn't do it very often because he's faster. So he'll just go shoot a layup instead of shooting a three. Um, but in games like that, where they want to come out and really pressure us in the half court or in the full court, um, that is not something we really worry about, because between him and Daniel, they can just attack that pressure. And it actually ends up having the reverse effect. You try to pressure us to turn us over or speed us up. Well, you are almost giving us a layup because those two are so good against pressure.
Yeah, he's one of those types of guards where he knows exactly what he's doing on the floor. He's sometimes with guards when they shoot the ball, sometimes they're a little too happy shooting the three ball. He's very disciplined in terms of what shot he finds. So he can be a slasher, he can attack the rim, he can get layups, he can feed other players to score, he can shoot the ball as well. And I've noticed a huge change with Schley as well. But obviously, you get to semi-state, and at this point, 2-round semi-state. It's a reset for your team. You're 2 wins away from getting to Gainbridge for the first time since 2014 for the 2-time state champion Westview Warriors from way back in 1999 and 2000. But awaiting you is Lapel at Monroe Central. And Lapel's got a team. They've got athletes of their own down in Anderson. They were down 8 and they came back to win by 12 against Blackford. Led by Owen Garber, they have 5 players averaging 10 points per game. They average 16 assists, and they're shooting 39% from 3. So they have athletes, clearly, and they got a lot of multi-sport kids that do very well in Lapel, especially in football, where they've had success as well. What are your early impressions with Lapel? What are some things that you're going to have to emphasize for your team as you prepare for a very busy Saturday, hopefully at Muncie Central, excuse me?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're a team that is kind of similar to us. They're a lot of guards. They're not really that big, but they're athletic. They can get to the rim. They can shoot it, and it's at like every spot. Every guy can make a three, so it spreads the floor. You can't help too much. So defensively, they get out in passing lanes. They're aggressive. They're fast in transition. I mean, I feel like all those things are kind of describing us. So I think it should be a really good matchup. We're going to have to do a good job of getting back in transition. We're also going to have to do a good job of making sure that we cover our gaps up top, so that way they're not getting downhill. They do a lot of, they get the ball on a wing and try to drive it to the middle, pretty aggressive. So if we can do those things, then I think we have a pretty good chance. But they're a heck of a team. They've got a tough strength of schedule. So and at this point, anybody can win. It's you just got to win the one game, right, and move on to the next one. So they're a really good team that we're going to have to make sure we're really prepared for.
Yeah, and this semi-state also includes Bishop Luers and Oak Hill, which that was the opponent that when Westview last played semi-state in 2018 was Oak Hill. And so that's a very interesting semi-state at Muncie Central. Last question from you, Coach. You have Bluffton connections, and that's a school with a lot of basketball tradition over the years down in Wells County at Bluffton High School. So obviously family connections down there, Bluffton connections down there. You have connections down your previous tenant at Eastern Pekin, which they ironically won a state championship in girls basketball once again at Eastern. Talk about those connections along the way with Bluffton and Eastern Pekin that's kind of helped you become the coach you are today.
Well, yeah, I mean, all of it, I feel like every single year I've learned something. I was very fortunate when I was growing up at Bluffton. My dad was an assistant coach. Coach Wayne Barker was the head coach there for pretty much my whole childhood. And he was very successful. He was very good at X's and O's. He also was very good with relationships with the guys. And so I was able to learn and grow from that. And then Coach Kevin Lysing took over, and I believe he's maybe the fastest coach to 200 wins, I think, or fastest coach to 100 wins. But so he was very successful whenever he first started out, and I got to coach underneath him. And I played for him and coached underneath him. And then Coach Benedict, Chris Benedict, took over at Bluffton. He's got, I think it's over 400 wins, and still coaching at Carroll. And so I was very lucky growing up to be underneath a lot of people who were very successful at what they did. And so, I didn't feel like I had to go do anything overly special. I just kind of did what what seemed normal to all of those guys. So I, I can't thank them enough for just being a part of it and being around it. But then, getting to be able to go to Eastern. Well, and I skipped Central Noble. My father-in-law, I was there for a year with him. He ended up, taking them to a state finals appearance, and so I've been lucky to be around a lot of successful people in coaching. And then I went down to Eastern. They were lucky enough to take a chance on a young 20-something-year-old, and spent 2 good years down there. We just went and visited about a month ago down there and watched the boys play, and got to see a lot of our friends from down there. So it's a special place down there too, and made a lot of good connections, and got to learn about myself and how I wanted to be a head coach. And it's much different than being an assistant or a freshman or JV coach. And they gave me that opportunity, and I'll forever be grateful for that. And then the Westview job came open, and we had our first child at the time, and my wife wanted to get back up around family, so we moved up this way. And she's from Garrett, so kind of in that same conference. So we're within an hour from family now instead of the 4-hour trip. But no, it's been awesome. I've had great players I've been able to coach so far, and so we've been able to win a lot of games up here, and that's awesome. But that's a whole lot more credit to the culture and tradition of Westview, and the types of kids that we've been able to coach, more so than anything me or the coaching staff have necessarily been able to do. So I've been blessed to walk into a lot of really good situations, and just kind of enjoying the ride right now.
Yeah, you obviously mentioned Central Noble. You briefly was you was under John Bodie, your father-in-law, at Central Noble during your early coach career. And Central Noble had a great run under John Bodie, the winningest coach in the program's history. 3 conference tournament championships, a conference championship, 2 sectional titles, and a state championship run, or state run, I should say, in 2022 with Connor Seager. So obviously that's a notable mention with Central Noble as well, with a great career ahead for you as your team gets ready for semi-state on Saturday. Any final thoughts from you, Coach, before we let you go?
No, just thanks for having me on and let me talk about our team a little bit, and all the people that have kind of helped me along the way. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Coach. Good luck as you prepare for a big semi-state at Muncie Central.
Yep, I appreciate it.
Joining me is the longtime head coach of the Homestead Spartans, Chris Johnson. His team repeats as regional champions for the first time in 11 years, I should say. It's been a while, but since you had a repeat regional championship at Homestead. But the standard's always been high with the Spartans. You've been doing this for quite a while at Homestead, going on 27 seasons at Homestead, 32 overall within the realms of Fort Wayne, Indiana. Coach, it's been a minute since that regional championship. Anything coming out of regionals as you prepare for a big semi-state up in Elkhart?
Well, again, anytime you can win a regional, sectional, go far in the tournament, it's exciting time of the year. Our kids are excited about being able to go up to Logansport this past week, win a very, good game, and played very well against a Harrison team that was, 18-8 at the time, and had some big wins. So we were able to, shut down their 2 scores, try to make it difficult for them, and held a team that, averages 58 points a game to 38 on that night. So I was pleased with their defensive effort. And, we're excited about this week and the challenge that is ahead of us against a very, very good Northridge team. And then if we happen to get by them, then you have Snyder and Crown Point sitting there waiting for you for a chance to go to the state championship.
Yeah, in a 2-round semi-state, it's always kind of the busy time of the year. It's always a challenging week because of those 2 rounds and a long day of basketball ahead for that particular round and whatnot. Coach, your team is 20-6 at Homestead. It always feels like every year, it always feels like this team's always in the midst. Yes, you've been fortunate enough to have a lot of talent over the years. I mentioned in an email about Caleb Swanigan, who was a big part of your team winning the state title in 2015. But I mean, we can go all day about the players coming through Homestead. It's a lot of talented players. And right now with this group, you got two really talented juniors in Jake Kuhlman and Matt Welker. But you got some supporting cast that really make this possible, like a Ryder Emmel, right? And a Mason Weaver, and the guys that really contribute to make this team possible. And, your team really bounced back quite nicely coming off a midseason skid when you lost to Snyder, Columbia City, and Northside. You have only lost once since that skid around January 23rd, and that only loss came in Carroll right around the last couple of weeks of the season. How is your team be able to kind of ride this wave the last several weeks of the season?
Well, we started off strong where we were 7-1. Then we went through a stretch to where, and again, there's no excuses. We did go through some illness during a tough stretch. We played a very good Southside team, played well, won at their place, beat the Blackhawk team at their place, and I thought things were rolling and clicking. I mean, we were averaging around 67 a game on those two games. Um, and then, Snyder comes into town and, took it to us where, I mean, we just looked, they made us look bad. So, a lot of credit to them. They're a very athletic team. But then we struggled. Columbia City came in, they took it to us. We struggled against Marion a little bit, shooting the basketball. But what was, I guess the concern was we were struggling on the defensive end. And that can't ever happen because we were allowing our defense or our offensive struggles really turn into us not playing what we need to do or playing as hard as what we needed to do on the defensive end. So we got that turned around. We went in and played against a very good, as you can see, where they're in the semi-state also, New Haven at their place. We were able to knock them off. And then we started to roll again because, the defense, they started to understand what it took as far as on the defensive end to keep us in games, even when we were struggling on the outside on the offensive end. So, we played well. Carroll then took it to us to where we just weren't able to make any outside shots. And again, give credit to Carroll on their defensive effort on that night. But you've got to be able to stretch the defense. We do have that with Emmel and some of these other, Kuhlman. Braylon McNeese is coming in and really shining as far as on the outside, being able to stretch the defense. So he comes in for his brother when they decide to where they're sloughing off of Brogan a little bit. Mason Weaver's been doing a great job, and then since the sectional game against Wayne, we started playing Gavin Wells as another sophomore. That's really given us a spark off the bench. He can stretch the defense with his shooting. So I was been very pleased with where we are over the last 11 games, 10-1 over the last 11, and especially ever since the sectional time where we beat a very good Southside team, held a team that averages I think 60 something to 41 points. Held Wayne, who averages 60-something to 48 points. And then we were able to, go into the regional last week against Harrison, where they averaged around 58 points to where we held them to 38 points. So I think our defense and our strategy as far as our schemes with what we're doing, our kids are dialed in there. We have a tough go around come Saturday and with their size and strength, and they've got shooters on the outside. So we're going to have to figure out what scheme we're going to have to play against a very good Northridge team to see what we can do to defeat them.
We'll address that matchup in a matter of moments, but I want to briefly mention the junior talented core of Matt Welker and Jake Puma, likely all-stars, or at least in the consideration of Indiana all-stars for the junior class. Great players, two of the best players in Fort Wayne, Indiana. In the biggest games, those two seem to shine the brightest with Matt Welker and Jake Puma. Even in the Harrison game, Welker, I think, was 10 of 11 shooting, 23 points, 7 rebounds, I believe, against Harrison. Then Puma, while he didn't have the typical scoring, he was kind of flirting a triple-double in that Harrison game. I think he had 6 steals in that game as well. And he was key on the defensive side. Just talk about how those two have been huge contributions to this program in these past almost 3 years now.
Well, obviously, I have high hopes for them and have you know, big. The level is high for how I feel what those two guys can do. I brought them up as freshmen. Because I saw the ability that they have. We were struggling a little bit when they were freshmen. Some things happened to where, I don't want to get into full detail of the freshman year, but, I basically, wrote them and said, you guys are going to come in, you're going to be the future of what we want to do and what we want to build. So they learned a lot that year. They finished 14-13, and we lost a lot of players from the year before. We had kids that come in and really played hard in that junior class that ended up then winning a sectional and a regional last year with that group that were juniors that went around 500, 14-13 and added on to the freshmen. So then all of a sudden they were sophomores and seniors. Went into Wayne, upset Wayne. Last year went on, won the regional, and then played very well for basically 3 quarters against a Crown Point team, who's back at it again this year. So the expectations were high for those two young guys. Now they're juniors. Now they are the leaders of the team with these other kids, with the youngsters that are coming up now, with the freshmen and sophomores that get a lot of playing time. And they're showing their maturity. They're showing their leadership right now. Especially when it struggled at the middle of the year. They gathered them, they got them back together, and now we're back rolling again. And it's due to those two guys and their leadership, and what they can do on the floor.
Yeah, that is definitely, and I remember that their freshman year quite well. That was definitely a year of learning, and then the payoff was definitely strong. And you could definitely see the growth since their freshman season on onward to them being as juniors going into semi-state against a very good Northridge team. 25-1 are the Northridge Raiders, their first ever semi-state appearance. They took care of St. Joe on Saturday, and Brady Scholes, the big name at Northridge, 33 points, 17 rebounds, 11 of 16 shooting, 11 for 20 at the foul line, 3 blocks, 2 assists. He pretty much does a lot. Pretty much the whole offense runs through him for the most part at Northridge. And you got Hayden Johnson with 10 points in that game at St. Joe. Freeman Schlabel had a big game, a career game against St. Joe with 18 in that game. So that's kind of the team you're expecting with Northridge. Is they're physical, they're a more patient team. They're going to run their offense through their bigs, and then they're going to be selective, and then defensively they're physical, going to get after you defensively. And so you know what to expect on both ends of the floor. And then on the other end, if you're lucky enough, Crown Point, the defending the reigning champs, or at least they were in the regional semi-state finalists. And you have Snyder playing their first semi-state since 2009. But the focus right now has to be on Northridge. What are your initial thoughts on the Northridge team from the coach's perspective?
Well, I think you said it all, as far as what they have, and our worries as far as coaching, as far as the coaching staff, and with what we want to do and how we want to scheme them on the defensive end. So again, it comes with their big Shaw. Yeah, he's a load. He's very good. I watched him live when they were playing Brownsburg out of Grace right before we played South Bend Riley, several months ago. And again, I didn't watch a lot, because I wasn't scouting them or anything, but you could tell who the players are, and he's a big time player. So we know that our work is cut out for us with him. That they got shooters around him. They got a good guard that's been playing extremely well, like you said, at 18 points against St. Joe. So he can get to the basket. He takes care of the basketball. So, Coach Radiker has all the tools and all the pieces. But, again, I feel like we are the same way. I feel like we're very similar to their style. We've got a big that matches kind of what their big can do. We've got a point guard that's pretty daggone good. We've got Emil that can really shoot it on the outside. We got, the toughness in the McNeeses and with Weaver. So, I feel like the matchup is there and pretty close. Now it's just a matter of being able to execute at a high level. Hopefully our shots really, we were making a lot of shots against Wayne, and anytime you do that, you're gonna look pretty good. Against Harrison, our outside shots, I think we finished at 2 and 12. Against Wayne, I think we were 12 of 22 as far as, from the three. So, if we're able to make those shots and hit those shots, it's really going to open it up on the inside for Welker and those other guys with McNeese's. So that's what we're hoping. I'm sure it's the same way for them. We're going to try to bottle up Shaw and make it difficult on him around the basket, try to push him out, and then hopefully their outside shots aren't falling.
Yeah, definitely to be a challenge inside, I think, for Welker. It should be a fascinating matchup between Welker and Shaw. So it'll be a good matchup to watch on Saturday. Up in Elkhart in Northside Gymnasium. Should be a good crowd for both teams in that game. Last question for me, Coach. You've been coaching at Homestead for 28, basically 26 years at Homestead, right? You are the winningest coach in program history. You're one of the winningest coaches ever in Fort Wayne, Indiana. 469 wins, 548 overall. You had a little bit of brief stint in Bishop Wayner. You've had plenty of moments at your time at Homestead. Obviously, that 2015 state championship is up there in your memories. But do you have other memories or recollections that still stand out to you in your many years at coaching at Homestead?
Well, again, I've been very fortunate. Great community, great young men, great families that I've been able to get to know over my tenure. Very fortunate. I've been at two schools with Dwenger and Homestead that do things right. Academics come first. We understand that. Athletics is a big part of it, also, though, as far as the community. So been very blessed. Hopefully we can keep this thing rolling. There's a lot of good memories. I don't want to pick and choose. We're very fortunate to where the ball bounced our way the year, we won a state championship. There were other teams out there, when we were number one with Goody and Fletcher, to where we went in and the ball just didn't, fall our way. We got beat we were number one that year. We got beat by the number two team in the state in Carmel. They ended up going to win it. There have been years where we were down at the regional, and we were tied with Carmel, who ended up winning it that year. I can't remember what year that was, but that was with Gamble and those guys and Seth Coate and some of those players that were on there, to where very easily, if the ball would have bounced our way, maybe that could have been us. But the basketball gods have to be on your side. We were fortunate enough, last year with Wayne, where the ball bounced our way. When teams are struggling as far as on the outside, uh, you know, good things could happen. But it comes down to making shots. I remember another year with Ferguson and Mangus and Durnell, that year. But we had to go through, and we got beat three times to them in Northside with Butts and Brooks, and they had pretty good careers. Butts went on and played, I think, at DePaul, and I think about Brooks with his playing at Northside, and went on to Washington and played at Washington University. Now he's in the NBA, and I think he's in the G League still, trying to move his way up. So, a lot of good talent here in Fort Wayne. I was blessed to where a lot of talent has come through Homestead. And again, I'm never sitting here patting myself on the back. I understand that the players are the product. The players have to do the things that they have to do as far as putting the ball in the basket, defending at a high level, not being selfish, playing the right way. And I've been very fortunate over my 32 years of kids that put the team, put the name on their jersey, Homestead, Dwenger, first and foremost. And that makes me look like I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, obviously a lot of talents come through this program. Obviously, you're wearing a Purdue shirt, and I know that's been well represented with Homestead going to Purdue with the late Caleb Swanigan, rest in peace to Biggie, had a great career at Purdue, played a little bit in the NBA, and obviously Fletcher Lawyer, now two-time Big Ten tournament champion, multiple conference championships for him, run already to the national title game, looking to try to make another run in March as well for Fletcher at Purdue. So, any final thoughts, Coach? A lot of information. We talked a lot about Homestead, and somebody said, "Do you have any final statement or final word about what we talked about today?"
Well, just like what I told the kids today, we're going to have 5 days where we already had one, so 4 more days of good hard practice. take advantage of this situation. I mean, you never know. Things could happen. We want to sit here and say we're young. Wait till next year. There's never wait till next year. I mean, we have the opportunity right now. You got to believe with what we can do. I believe in this team. I believe in this group of young men. There are 12 young men that are close knit. They work very hard for one another. They come to practice every day to improve their skill, and let's make the most of it. And again, we're going to come in there come 10 o'clock Saturday. We're going to give our 100%. We're going to be diving on the floor. We're going to go for those 50-50 balls, the loose balls. And the team that does that and the ball bounces their way is the team I think is going to be able to win this championship come Saturday.
All right, that is indeed the case with Homestead and upcoming matchup on Saturday against Northridge at Elkhart's Northside Gymnasium. Coach, thank you for taking time to talk about the Homestead Spartans, and best of luck to you and your team.
Thank you, Sam. I appreciate it.
Joining me is the longtime head boys basketball coach of the Oak Hill Golden Eagles, Kevin Renbarger, as his team is heading to semi-state and Muncie Central to take on the Fort Wayne Bishop Lures Knights. Coach, how are things going for you? It's a 25-1 team. It's a special year for a program that expects to win at this time of the year, and you got a squad that can do something special this weekend.
Yeah, it's been a fun year for sure. Going into this season, there were a lot of high expectations with this particular group. We had a lot of kids back. Jace Tonigal and RJ Schugert were the centerpieces of our team. But then we also added Will Tonigal, who came with a lot of notoriety and expectation himself, and a transfer over from Eastbrook, and Jaden Yance. So the expectations were high, and give these kids credit. They've met the expectations at almost every turn, and are playing at a pretty high level and doing it at the right time of the year, obviously.
Yeah, 25-1, you're definitely doing something right at this time of the year. You look at the schedule for your team. You've had some big wins this year, including the win against Zionsville on January the 10th. You had a nice win against LaPel on January the 31st. Competed very well against Homestead back on the 7th in a 5-point loss to Homestead, which a game you probably could have won that game easily. That was a very competitive game against Homestead there. Beating Marion for the first time since 2003 at their place, especially, was huge for your team. Just talk about those marquee games there, and just talk about how the team has progressed over the years.
Well, again, like we said, going into the season, we knew that we had potential to have a really good basketball team, not just for this year, but looking ahead even next year and for this foreseeable future. We had a couple of contracts run out. We also had a couple of games on our schedule where, quite honestly, the opponents, we weren't benefiting from it. They weren't necessarily benefiting from it. So we had a mutual agreement to part ways. So we had an opportunity here. We had a window where we could find some bigger schools to kind of challenge us. And we did this in 2018 when we made the state tournament run. We were able to put Lawrence North on our schedule, get into the Hall of Fame Classic, and played a team from Kentucky that was really, really good. And we just felt like the window was open now and the time was right. And so we were able to get Zionsville and Marion and Homestead to agree on multiple year contracts and play us. And, I think probably the Zionsville game was the game that inside of our locker room, there was this feeling as though we could be good. We should be good. And then we beat Zionsville. And I think it proved to the kids that we do have a potential of being a really good basketball team that could make a deep run and, make some noise throughout the season, but then into the postseason as well. Homestead was another game that, again, we're talking about possessions here. We're not talking about being overmatched or, we brought a good team in and they just kind of walloped us. We were there. We had a chance to tie with just under a minute to go in the game against a really, really good, obviously they're in the 4A semi-state this year, and have a really good chance, I think, of being a Hall of Fame tournament team next year. They're bringing everybody back. And so to be able to compete with that game, and then also the big game at Marion. It's a huge rivalry here in Grant County for us. We'd only beaten them twice, actually twice now, just one time since 1971. And so to go into that game and play as well as we did, again, we've just been kind of steady Eddie throughout the season. That we've just been consistent. There haven't been a lot of games where we've come out, overlooked our opponent, or looked scared of the moment, so to speak. Just come out, very workman-like approach to it. But, I think the kids are fun to watch. They play hard. They're aggressive. They get after it on the defensive end of the floor. We play a brand of defensive basketball that, I haven't really seen here and coached here in the 30 years that I've been at Oak Hill. So, it's just been a really good kind of a magical season where everything's come together, and we hope that we can keep this thing going.
Yeah, and I talked to Scott Hunt during the sectional about Oak Hill has been the absolute epitome of consistency, and defensively you can tell this team is locked in defensively. Really, just any guy on that team is going to make plays, no matter what. Just talk about the team. We know that there's a very balanced team. We know what the records are, and the numbers are. What's the team like being able to coach this team every day?
Goofballs. No, they're a good group of kids. We were fortunate enough to take a missions trip to Jamaica. Not everybody on the team went. We did have a couple that didn't go. But I think the foundation of this basketball team was formed in Jamaica over the summertime, quite honestly. When you take a missions trip, that's not the goal. But you'd be lying if you didn't say that spending time with each other for an entire week in adverse conditions and circumstances and being away from social media and all of those things, you can't help but kind of grow together with one another. And then we have a fair majority of them that did not, unfortunately for our fall coaches, didn't play fall sports. So it was just a continuation once fall open season began that they could become so close-knit. The 2018 team that I keep referencing, the state championship team, they were very close as well. This team is as close, if not closer, with each other. And it's an unusual thing. I think it's really what is the cornerstone of what makes this team as good as they are, is that they're just complete unwillingness to let each other down. They're going to do what they can to make sure that we're successful for each other more than anything else. And so you couple that with obviously some skilled players that we have, and you've got yourself, again, like I said, a really, really good basketball season.
Very selfless team. I think that's the best way to describe it. Jace Tondrell's the big name, well, quote, quote, big name in Oak Hill, but he's not the only one. Like, he's a 1,000-point scorer, but but he's willing to share the ball with other guys. And then any given night, someone else is coming up with a big play here and there to help your team. We talked about sectionals. Will Tonadol had a massive game in the sectional. I don't remember if it was a semifinals or it was a championship game. I think he had 28, in one of those sectional games. And then obviously Jace being the epitome of what he is as a player. And then in regionals on Saturday against Benton Central. Benton Central hung around that first half against your team. But Katie Simmons had a big game, career game, 21 points, 8 rebounds against Benton Central. Talk about that experience down in Frankfurt and be able to take home a regional championship.
Yeah, first of all, I'll touch on what you talked about. I can't begin to tell you the number of times that we've said exactly what you just said to the team, Sam. We talk a lot about how on any given night we've got, Jace Tonagel, obviously, I'm very, very biased, but I think he's a junior all-star type of a kid, but he's only averaging 15 points a game. His brother's only averaging about 13, 15 points a game. RJ Schugert is averaging 11 points a game. And then we've got Jaden Yance and Luke Elzinga, Cavante Simmons, Landon Watts, Landon Cruzen, who all have really, really good numbers. And probably, quite honestly, all of them have, staked to a claim that they could be the leading scorer. They could be the man. They could start for other teams in this era of open, transfers and things like that. But they've kind of put all of that aside in order to do what's best for the name on the front of the jersey. And that continued on at Benton Central. Benton Central, very gritty, tough basketball team. We knew, we had seen it on film that they weren't going to give up. And I think our kids understood after the first quarter. We got out to a big double-digit lead, and they brought that thing all the way back down to 2. before the idiot ball coach decided to call a timeout and get the run stopped. But it's always special. We're only the fourth team in school history that could hoist a regional trophy. I know this was expected, which made it even probably more challenging and more difficult that you do something that everybody really expects you to do against a team that doesn't really care. And again, Benton Central was a team that was pretty determined to take Jace and Will out of the equation. And RJ was still recovering from the emergency appendectomy that he'd had a couple of years ago. So it was really prime for somebody to step up and fill a role or fill a void. And Cavante Simmons was that person. Jaden hit some big shots. Landon Watts hit some big shots. And RJ was able to compete, even though he's not at full strength, and made some contributions. But again, it was kind of indicative of the way that we've been all season. I harken back to the Blackford game. We had our CIC meeting tonight, and the Blackford coach had made the comment that, they tried really hard to take Will and Jace away, and RJ Shugart ends up with 32 points. And so, it's what we've put our hat on all year long. We put our hat on defense, getting out in transition and sharing the basketball, and it's been really good to us all season long.
Well, these are good characteristics as you prepare for a very battle-tested Fort Wayne Bishop Lures team coming up on Saturday. And this, Coach, if you know about Bishop Lures, when they wear the Bishop Lures crest, they expect to compete in the state tournament. That's kind of been the standard of Lures, whether it's football or basketball. And you look at 15-11 record and think, okay, they're not the best team out there. But when you actually look at the full picture of Bishop Lures, they play in the SAC, which they have two other members in semi-state in 4A. They play competition well outside the area. Like we're talking Southern Indiana, whatnot. They've played some tough competition, and they got some guys like Kamarian Davis, TJ English, Zen Shafersky, Jaden Moore. They're very deep in that backcourt. And then they get the big guy, Isle Taylor, who's going to Valpo for football, really strong player in the post. So I know that's going to be a challenge for going into that matchup against Bishop Lures. And then if you're fortunate enough, if you win that game, you got Westview or LaPel in the other game, and that's an even bigger challenge right there in a 2-round semi-state down in Muncie Central. Coach, your thoughts on Bishop Lures as you entered Saturday's semi-state matchup?
Well, you've hit it right on the head. We've seen this a lot in football with Bishop Lures. They come away with a record that seems to be right around 500 or maybe even a little under 500 in football season, and then they just roll through the 2A state championship exactly for the reason that you're talking about. You're playing the Summit Athletic Conference. I told our parents today during a parent meeting that they play on their schedule. They have 20 3A and 4A teams that they play on that schedule. Oak Hill does not. And so we really can't compare when it comes to that. We've bulked up our schedule, but Lures is still within the top 100 in regards to strength of schedule, according to the Sagarin. So that 15-11 that's not a 15-11 that would be at in Grant County. Let's just say that. And so we did play them this summer, and we got a little bit of a taste of how athletic they are. They're athletic. They're big. They can share the basketball. They play really good half-court defense. Man-to-man defense is really good. They'll pick it up full court as well. We played someone similar to them this year. We played Marion in regards to their athleticism and speed and all of those things. But I think this team is a little better than Marion in regards to the way that they play defense. They're very well coached on the defensive end of the floor. And they have an inside punch, which Marion did not have. And so it's going to be something that we're going to have to prepare for and be expected to be ready for come Saturday morning.
Yeah, and someone that's covered Bishop Lures, I can almost assure you they are definitely better defensively at Bishop Lures. So this will definitely be a challenge from that standpoint. I do have another question regarding the semi-state, because this is always the tricky part about this time of the year. Because it's a 2-round semi-state, you put a lot of preparation for that first game, because you got to win that first game to advance. And then the second game, it kind of goes what it is, right? Because you got to make that quick recovery for the second game and whatnot. How do you keep the team focused on just worrying about Bishop Lures and try not to make the moment too big, knowing how competitive this semi-state looks on paper?
Yeah, I don't think. Well, there are a couple of things. One, this is something that they've been thinking about and preparing for 6 months, 9 months. We prepare for the toughest opponents on our schedule and the toughest moments on our schedule. And the semi-state is something that we've had circled for a very long time. Overlooking Bishop Luers, not a problem. Bishop Luers beat us this summer. Our kids didn't forget that. We played them up at Huntington, and so we know what Bishop Luers has and what they're going to provide for us. All of our focus and preparation goes into that first game. We played a Grant 4 basketball tournament that was very similar, same setup, same situation, and all of that. And that, sorry, my security system is barking back here, but we're going to put everything that we can into this first game. And I've got a couple of assistant coaches. One is taking Westview, and the other one's taking Luers. I anticipate that they'll have a full scouting report ready to go for me to look at starting Thursday, and then I'll take, after I get done kind of with what Luers presents to us, I'll be the one that kind of takes a look at those other two teams and start looking at that. But in regards to the kids, they've given me no reason to this point not to trust them, that all of their attention and focus is on Fort Wayne Luers. And I think more than anything, instead of getting caught up in the moment, I think they're just relishing the moment, and they understand. All kids understand. Luers kids understand. The Westview kids and Lapel kids understand. This is Indiana high school basketball. You don't get any bigger than this moment right here. I've been through this once before in 218, and I'll tell you that respectfully to everybody at the state level, the semi-state atmosphere is by far and away the best atmosphere. When we played Westview, that's the game that I remember. I don't remember a lot about the state game as much as I do about the atmosphere and everything that surrounded the semi-state. And it's just really cool that we're a part of it, and we're certainly looking forward to it.
Yeah. And obviously it's going to be a great moment for those kids that they'll remember for sure on that. Last basketball in general has had a lot of great moments over the years. Girls basketball just went to state finals. They won state in 2019 as well. You've been coaching at Oak Hill for a long time. This is your 21st year at Oak Hill. You're an alum, I believe, at Oak Hill. You've seen a lot of moments with Oak Hill, and especially you being an administrator and whatnot. Is there anything that you remember your time in Oak Hill that kind of stands out to you, even if it's just the little things like all the meetings with your players or the trips?
I've been a coach at Oak Hill for 30 years, and so I've seen a lot. My second year at Oak Hill, we were playing over at Madison Grant, and Coach Knight was made an appearance because we had Jared Odell on our team. I was actually an assistant coach. I was a freshman level coach, and Jared Odell was on our team as a junior, and Coach Knight and Bob Hamill wanted to come over and take a look at while we were playing at Madison Grant. And I very distinctly remember the head coach saying, "Hey, Coach Knight wants some stats. I need you to go up there and take them up there to him." And I almost choked on my tongue thinking that I'm a freshman coach and I'm going to take a set of stats up to Bob Knight. So, I can remember all the way back to those days, but, we've had a lot of good memories, and I've been exceptionally fortunate as the head coach to have a lot of great teams here. In 07, 08, and then 08, 09, we had two teams that were rated number one in the state and just happened to run into Derek Elston and the boys at Tipton during their sectional runs. Obviously, I had an opportunity to coach my son and his team. They were rated number one in 216 and got upset to eventual state champion Lapel, and then obviously the state championship run in 218. So we've been really fortunate to have a lot of great basketball teams. Each one of them are unique and different in their own way, and this team this year is no different. But I cherish every moment that we've had, either as an assistant coach, for the 7-8 years I was an assistant coach here at Oak Hill, or the 21 years that I've been the head coach.
Well, that's wonderful to hear, Coach. Any final thoughts before we let you go? Obviously, it's a magical year for your team. You got a big day on Saturday down in Muncie Central with a lot of history down there, the Muncie Central Fieldhouse. Any final thoughts or comments you have going into Saturday?
Yeah, believe it or not, as old as I am, I've never been to the Muncie Fieldhouse. So we're going down to practice tomorrow. That'll be the first time I've ever been in there. So, it's it's a bad timing for Oak Hill. We're on spring break starting Thursday, so I'm not sure we'll have much of a student section. So if we have anybody left in Sweetser, Swayze, and Converse, I guess this is my plea to try to make it down to Muncie at 10 o'clock on Saturday, which should be, I think, one of the most competitive semi-states in the state. Would be on Saturday with the 4 games evenly matched. I think every team has a right to claim that they have a legitimate shot of representing the North in the state championship game, evenly matched. And as I said, I think it'll be a great day of basketball, and we're looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's been publicly known that Oak Hill does travel well. So fans are usually pretty good about supporting the Oak Hill basketball team. So I think we expect a pretty good crowd down in Muncie Central. Coach, thank you. Talking about the Oak Hill Eagles basketball team. Good luck to you and your team as you head down to Muncie Central on Saturday.
Thank you, sir.